Nessa Thor had 3 rules for survival in the cargo hauling business. Never take on passengers, never ask questions about sealed containers, and never, ever get involved in other people's problems. She was about to break all 3. Meridian. Hub thrummed with the controlled chaos that made it one of the busiest trade stations in the Outer Territories. Nessa shouldered her way through the crowd, her worn leather jacket and confident stride marking her as someone who belonged here. She'd just delivered a load of medical supplies to the stations. Clinic-legitimate cargo for once, and her credit chip was pleasantly heavy in her pocket. Clearance scan complete. The security droid announced in its flat mechanical voice. Proceed to docking ring 7. Nessa nodded and moved toward the departure gates, already mentally calculating her next run. Maybe something toward the Helios cluster. With the mining operations always needed, the explosion cut off her thoughts. Not a real explosion, but close enough, the sudden blare of alarms and the cascade of emergency lights, turning the concourse into a strobing nightmare of red and white. The crowd's orderly flow dissolved into confusion. Security lockdown initiated, an automated voice announced. All personnel maintain current positions. Damn it, Nessa muttered, watching her departure window slam shut. Lockdowns could last hours, and every hour here meant credits lost on her next job. That's when she saw her the woman, felt inadequate, moved through the crowd, like water flowing around stones. Graceful and purposeful, despite the obvious panic in her movements. Her skin held an opalescent quality. It shifted between pale lavender and soft pearl, depending on the light. Long dark hair, so deep a purple, was almost black, fell in waves past her shoulders. But it was her eyes that caught Nessa's attention, large, almond-shaped, and a violet so vivid they seemed to glow. She was beautiful in a way that made Nessa's breath catch. And she was clearly running from something. The security team appeared seconds. Later, 6 heavily armed officers in corporate insignia that Nessa recognized immediately. Helix Solutions, one of the mega-corporations that practically owned half the stations in this sector. Their presence meant serious trouble. The violet-eyed woman's gaze swept the concourse desperately, and then locked onto Nessa with an intensity that felt physical. She changed direction, heading straight toward her. Nessa's instincts screamed at her to walk away, to disappear into the crowd before whatever mess this was could splash onto her. But something in those desperate eyes kept her feet planted. The woman reached her just as the security team's shouts grew louder. Up close, Nessa could see the fine crystalline patterns that traced along her temples and down her neck, not quite scales, more like faceted gemstones embedded in her skin. "Please," the woman said, her voice melodious but tight with fear. "I need your help." Would you pretend to be she hesitated, searching for words, "my bonded partner? Just until they pass?" It was such an absurd request that Nessa almost laughed. Instead, she found herself doing something far more foolish. She grabbed the woman's hand and pulled her close, wrapping an arm around her waist in what she hoped looked like an intimate embrace. "Play along," Nessa whispered, feeling the woman's body tense against hers. "And try to look less like you're being hunted." The woman alien, Nessa's mind supplied, though the term felt clinical for someone who felt this warm and real, melted into the embrace with surprising ease. Her head tucked naturally into the curve of Nessa's shoulder, and one hand came up to rest against Nessa's chest, right over her racing heart. The security team swept past them, their attention focused on the crowd ahead. Humans were known for their casual physical affection, a trait that made many alien species uncomfortable. It made for excellent camouflage. Nessa counted to 30 before loosening her grip. "They're gone. You want to tell me why Helix Solutions is chasing you through a public station?" The woman stepped back, but didn't let go of Nessa's hand. "My name is Jebris Solara, and I'm truly grateful for your assistance. even if it was reluctant. Nessa Thorne, and I didn't say it was reluctant. A small smile curved Jevers' lips. Your body language did. The way your shoulders tensed, the slight shift of your weight toward the exit. You wanted to run. And yet, I didn't. Nessa studied her more closely. Which probably makes me an idiot. So Jevers Solara, what did you do to get Helix on your tail? I stole something they want back very badly. Of course you did. Nessa glanced around the concourse. More security teams were fanning out through the crowd, their scanners active. I'm guessing they're not going to give up and go home. Not likely, Jevers agreed, her violet eyes studying Nessa with unnerving intensity. You're a pilot. Independent, based on your attire and the way you navigate the station. And your ship is ready for departure. I can see the launch code still displayed on your wrist cum. Nessa looked down at her wrist in surprise. The display had timed out minutes ago. How did you? My species has excellent visual memory. Also, I'm very good at reading people. Jevers squeezed her hand gently. I realize I'm asking for a tremendous favor, but could you possibly— Docking ring 7, Bay 42, Nessa interrupted, surprising herself. Ship's called the Wandering Star. We need to move now, before they expand their search pattern. The relief that flooded Jevers' features was almost painful to witness. Thank you. I promise I can compensate you for— Save it. Come on. Nessa kept hold of Jevers' hand and started walking, forcing herself to maintain a casual pace, despite every instinct screaming at her to run. Stay close and look like you belong with me. I'm very good at adapting, Jevers murmured, matching her stride perfectly. They navigated through the crowd, Nessa using her knowledge of the station's layout to avoid the main security checkpoints. Twice they had to duck into alcoves as patrol teams passed, and each time Jevers pressed close to her, their bodies fitting together in a way that felt far too natural for strangers. The checkpoint to docking ring. 7 had lighter security, just 2 guards running standard ID scans. Nessa approached with confidence, already pulling up her clearance codes. Credentials, the guard demanded. A bored-looking human with too many weapons strapped to his belt. Nessa handed over her chip. Nessa Thorne, registered pilot. Cleared for departure. The guard scanned it, then looked at Jevers. And her? My partner, Nessa said smoothly, hoping her voice didn't betray her nerves. She's traveling with me. I'll need to see her ID as well. Jevers pressed closer to Nessa's side, her hand finding the small of Nessa's back in a gesture that felt possessive. My identification is on record with her ship's manifest, she said, her voice taking on a subtle purr that made something warm curl in Nessa's stomach. We're bonded partners. Surely that's sufficient? The guard's expression shifted to discomfort, the universal reaction to perceived romantic intimacy. Right, yeah, just go ahead. They passed through the checkpoint without further challenge. But Nessa didn't relax until they reached Bay 42, and she saw the Wandering Star waiting in her berth. The ship wasn't much to look at a mid-sized freighter with mismatched hull plating from multiple repairs, but she was fast, reliable, and most importantly, paid for. She's perfect, Jevers said softly, genuine appreciation in her voice. She's home, Nessa corrected, pressing her palm to the entry scanner. The boarding ramp extended with a familiar hydraulic hiss. Get inside. I need to run preflight. The interior of the Wandering Star was cramped, but clean, everything secured and in its place. Nessa led Jevers to the cockpit and gestured to the co-pilot's seat. Strap in. This might get rough if they've flagged my ship. Jevers complied, her fingers deftly working the harness. Nessa dropped into the pilot's seat and began the launch sequence, her hands moving through the familiar routine with practiced ease. Wandering Star, this is Meridian Control, the cum crackled. You're cleared for standard departure, Vector 12. Too easy. Nessa thought, but she wasn't about to argue. She guided the ship out of its berth, feeling the familiar thrum of the engines through her seat. They were halfway to the departure vector when everything went wrong. Wandering star. Halt immediately and prepare for boarding inspection. Nessa's jaw tightened. Here we go. She diverted power to the engines, feeling the ship surge forward. They're launching pursuit craft, Jevers said, her eyes on the sensor display. She'd pulled up the tactical systems without being asked, her fingers moving across the controls with surprising confidence. Hold on, Nessa warned, then pushed the throttle forward. The wandering star might not look like much, but Nessa had spent years and most of her savings upgrading the engines. The ship leaped forward, racing toward the jump coordinates she'd already plotted. Tractor beam lock detected, Jevers announced, her calm voice at odds with the alarm in her eyes. Not today. Nessa's fingers danced across the controls, initiating a program she'd installed for exactly this kind of emergency highly illegal, but incredibly effective. The ship shuddered, then tore free from the tractor beam with a wrench that made the hull groan. Nessa didn't give them a chance to lock on again. She initiated the jump sequence, and the stars outstretched into lines of light. For a moment, they sat in silence, the only sound the steady hum of the hyperdrive. Then Jevers let out a shaky breath that turned into a surprised laugh. That was illegal, dangerous, and probably going to get me blacklisted from Meridian Hub, Nessa finished. But she was grinning despite herself. The adrenaline still sang through her veins. I was going to say exhilarating, Jevers said, turning to face her. In the cockpit's soft lighting, her opalescent skin seemed to glow, and those violet eyes held something warm and wondering. Thank you, Nessa Thorne. I owe you my life. Yeah, well. Nessa unstrapped from her seat, suddenly very aware of how small the cockpit was, how close Jevers sat. You can thank me by explaining exactly what we're running from, because Helix Solutions doesn't mobilize that kind of security for petty theft. Jevers's smile faded. No, they don't. What I took from them, she paused, choosing her words carefully. It's information that could save thousands of lives, and that they would kill to keep secret. Nessa felt her stomach sink. Of course it is. She ran a hand through her short hair, already regretting every decision that had led to this moment. All right. You'd better start from the beginning. As Jevers began to speak, explaining research facilities and illegal experiments, Nessa realized her life had just become infinitely more complicated. And somehow, looking into those desperate, grateful violet eyes, she couldn't bring herself to regret it. The wandering star cut through hyperspace like a needle through silk. But Nessa couldn't shake the feeling that they were being followed. She'd been piloting for 12 years, and her instincts had kept her alive through more close calls than she cared to count. Right now, those instincts were screaming. You're certain they can't track us through hyperspace? Jevers asked from the co-pilot's seat, where she'd remained for the past 2 hours. She'd been monitoring their sensor feeds with an intensity that spoke of genuine understanding, not just nervous observation. Nothing can track through hyperspace, Nessa replied, making a minor adjustment to their trajectory. It's physically impossible. The dimensional shift means we're not even in normal space. There's nothing to track. Then why do you keep checking the rear sensors? Nessa glanced at her, surprised. You're observant. I'm a researcher. Observation is my profession. Jevers's fingers moved across the sensor controls with practiced ease. And you've checked our 6 at least 30 times in the last hour. Either you don't trust your own statement about tracking, or you're expecting something else. Maybe both. Nessa leaned back in her seat, feeling the tension in her shoulders. Helix Solutions has resources that would make most planetary governments jealous. If there's a way to track ships through hyperspace, they'd have it. There is, Jevers said quietly. Nessa's head snapped around. What? Quantum entanglement markers. They're theoretical, mostly incredibly expensive, and difficult to manufacture. But if someone managed to attach one to your ship's hull before we departed, she trailed off. But the implication was clear. They'd know exactly where we are. Nessa cursed and pulled up the ship's external diagnostics. Can you scan for something like that? Not while we're in hyperspace. The dimensional interference would mask any readings. Jevers chewed her lower lip, a surprisingly human gesture. We'd need to drop back into normal space to run a proper scan, which could be exactly what they want us to do. Nessa's mind raced through their options. How long until we reach the exit coordinates? 43 minutes. Then we wait. But the second we drop out, you scan every centimeter of the hull. If there's anything attached to my ship, I want to know about it. Jevers nodded, then hesitated. Nessa, I'm sorry. I should have considered this possibility before I involved you. If they damage your ship, or if you're arrested because of me. Hey. Nessa reached over and touched Jevers' hand where it rested on the console. The contact sent an unexpected jolt through her. Jevers' skin was cooler than human normal, but not unpleasantly so. It felt like touching polished stone warmed by sunlight. I made my choice back on that station. Nobody forced me. You made that choice without all the information. Jevers turned her hand over, threading her fingers through Nessa's. The gesture felt intimate. Almost too intimate for two people who'd known each other for less than 3 hours. I should tell you everything. You deserve to know what you're risking yourself for. Nessa wanted to pull away, to maintain the professional distance that had served her so well over the years. Instead, she found herself squeezing Jevers' hand gently. I'm listening. Helix Solutions runs a research facility on Chronos 7, a moon in the outer rim that's officially listed as a mining operation. What they're actually doing there is genetic experimentation specifically. They're trying to create enhanced soldiers by splicing together DNA from multiple species. That's illegal under about 15 different treaties, Nessa said, her stomach churning. Yes, it's also killing their test subjects. Jevers' voice remained steady, but her grip on Nessa's hand tightened. I was brought in as a consultant on cellular compatibility. My species has unique regenerative properties that they wanted to incorporate into their designs. I didn't know the full scope of what they were doing until I'd been there for 3 months. What changed? I met one of the subjects, a young Terrillian girl, maybe 8 years old by their developmental standards. She couldn't have weighed more than 30 kilos, and she was. Jevers' voice cracked. They had her in a containment cell because the modifications were causing her body to reject itself. She was in constant pain, and they wouldn't even give her palliative care because they said it would interfere with the data. Nessa felt her jaw clench. Bastards. I tried to help her. Smuggled in pain medication. Spent time with her when I could. Her name was Thriss, and she loved hearing stories about other worlds. She'd never seen a real sky. Jevers took a shaky breath. She died 2 weeks ago. Her body just gave out, and they filed it as a promising data point because the modifications lasted longer than previous attempts. I'm sorry, Nessa said softly. Inadequate words for such a horror. After Thriss died, I couldn't just keep working there. I accessed their central database and copied everything. Research files, subject records, financial transactions showing which officials they'd bribed to look the other way. Everything. Jevers met Nessa's eyes, and in that violet gaze, Nessa saw fierce determination that made her breath catch. I'm going to make sure the galaxy knows what Helix Solutions is doing, and I'm going to make sure those children get justice. For a long moment, Nessa just looked at her, this beautiful, brave woman who'd risked everything for people she barely knew. Something shifted in her chest, a feeling she'd thought she'd buried years ago, along with her idealism. "Okay," Nessa said. "Then let's make sure you survive long enough to do it." A wandering star's proximity alarm blared, shattering the moment. "We're not supposed to exit hyperspace for another 37 minutes, Jevers said, her fingers flying over the controls. Nessa was already pulling up the navigation systems. "Someone's forcing us out. Massive gravitational anomaly directly in our path is pulling us back into normal space." "That's impossible. There's nothing in this sector massive enough to. It's artificial." Nessa's blood ran cold as understanding hit. "They're using a gravity well generator. Military-grade tech." The ship shuddered violently as it was torn out of hyperspace. Through the viewport, the stars snapped back into focus along with 3 sleek ships that definitely weren't military or civilian. Helix private security vessels, Jevers identified, her face pale. "Heavy assault class." The comm system crackled to life. "Unidentified freighter. Power down your engines and prepare to be boarded. Failure to comply will result in the use of lethal force." Nessa's hands were already moving across the controls. "Not happening." She diverted power to the engines and shields. "Hold on." The wandering star lurched forward, but the Helix ships were faster. Weapons fire streaked past them, warning shots that came close enough to make the hull temperature spike. "Shields at 80%, Jevers reported. "Having taken over the defensive systems without being asked. They're trying to disable us, not destroy us." "They want you alive," Nessa said, throwing the ship into a hard turn that made the artificial gravity stutter. "Which means we have a chance. They're that debris field. If I can get us into it." "That's an old battlefield," Jevers said, reading the sensors. "From the Rim Wars 30 years ago. The wrecks will still have active ordnance." "Good." Nessa grinned, a wild expression that made Jevers's eyes widen. "Let's give them something to worry about besides us." She dove the wandering star into the debris field, weaving between the skeletal remains of warships and the scattered debris of long-dead battles. Behind them, the Helix vessels followed, their weapons' fire becoming less accurate as they struggled to compensate for the obstacles. "There's a destroyer wreck ahead," Jevers said. "Looks mostly intact. There might be cover inside the hull breach." "I see it." Nessa adjusted their trajectory, threading the needle between 2 massive pieces of plating. The wandering star was designed for cargo, not combat maneuvers. But Nessa had learned to make her dance when she had to. They slipped through the breach in the destroyer's hull, entering a cavernous space that had once been a hangar bay. Nessa immediately cut power to everything except life support and minimal sensors, letting the ship drift in the darkness. "They'll scan for us," Jevers whispered, as if speaking too loudly might give them away. Old military vessels had sensor-dampening hulls. If we stay quiet, the Helix ships passed overhead, their searchlights cutting through the wreckage. Nessa held her breath, watching the tactical display as the 3 vessels spread out, methodically searching the debris field dot in the darkness of the cockpit. Illuminated only by the faint glow of emergency systems and Jevers's opalescent skin, they waited. Seconds stretched into minutes. Nessa became acutely aware of their proximity. They'd instinctively lean toward each other, their shoulders touching, as if seeking comfort in physical contact. "When I was at Meridian Station," Jevers said softly, "when I saw you in that crowd, I didn't choose you randomly." Nessa turned her head slightly, their faces now just inches apart. "No, no, you stood differently than everyone else. Like you were ready to move at any moment, but comfortable with where you were. Most people at the station looked nervous or impatient or aggressive. You looked," she paused, searching for the word, "free." "Free," Nessa repeated, tasting the word. "That's an interesting way to describe someone who's always one bad cargo run away from broke." Freedom isn't about money, Jevers said, and there was something in her voice that made Nessa think she was speaking from experience. It's about choosing your own path, even when that path is difficult. Is that what you're doing? Choosing the difficult path? I'm choosing the right path. There's a difference. Jevers's hand found Nessa's in the darkness. Though I'll admit, I didn't expect the path to include someone like you. Someone like me? Someone brave. Someone kind. Someone who helps strangers, even when it means destroying her own life. My life wasn't that great to begin with, Nessa said, attempting humor to deflect the intensity of the moment. But Jevers squeezed her hand, refusing to let her hide behind levity. Don't do that. Don't diminish what you did. What you're doing. Those violet eyes held Nessa's gaze. You saved my life, Nessa Thorne. That matters, regardless of what your life was like before. The proximity alert chirped softly. One of the Helix ships was circling back, moving closer to their position. Nessa started to pull away, to return her attention to the controls, but Jevers's other hand came up to cup her cheek. Wait, Jevers whispered. Just one moment. Then she closed the distance between them and kissed her dot. It was soft, tentative, a question more than a statement. Nessa's brain screamed that this was the worst possible timing, that they were hiding from armed ships in a debris field, that they'd known each other for less than 4 hours. Her heart didn't care about any of that. Dot, she kissed back, her free hand coming up to tangle in Jevers's dark purple hair. The kiss deepened, tentative, giving way to hunger. Jevers made a small sound in the back of her throat that sent heat pooling in Nessa's stomach. The proximity alert chirped again, more insistent this time. They broke apart, both breathing hard. In the dim light, Jevers's skin had taken on a deeper iridescence, a flush that made her even more beautiful. Terrible timing. Nessa managed. The worst, Jevers agreed. But she was smiling. They're moving away, Nessa said, checking the sensors. Heading toward the outer edge of the field. If we wait another 5 minutes, we might be able to slip out behind them. And then we run like hell and hope they don't have another gravity well generator. Nessa powered up the engines to minimal levels, just enough to start warming them for a quick departure. There's an independent way station about 6 hours from here, run by an old friend who doesn't ask questions and doesn't report to anyone. We can lay low there while we figure out our next move. Your friend won't mind harboring fugitives? Tobias? He'll probably charge us triple his normal rate, but yeah, he'll help. Nessa watched the tactical display as the Helix ships continued to move away. He owes me. I saved his life once, pulled him out of a bad situation on Calyx Prime. You make a habit of saving people then, Jevers said softly. Not usually. Usually I mind my own business and keep my head down. Nessa glanced at her. You're a very bad influence. I'll take that as a compliment. The Helix ships were now on the far side of the debris field. Nessa brought the engines up to full power and guided the wandering star out through a different breach, using the destroyer's bulk to mask their exit. They slipped away into the darkness of space, and this time, nothing followed. 2 hours into the journey to Tobias's way station, Nessa found Jevers in the small common area, staring at a datapad with an expression of deep concentration. What are you working on? Nessa asked, settling into the seat across from her, trying to figure out the best way to release this information. Jevers gestured to the pad. I need to make sure it reaches enough people simultaneously that Helix can't suppress it. News networks, government officials, independent journalists. I have a list of contacts, but I need to verify they're all still reliable. That's going to take time. Time I'm not sure we have. Jevers set down the pad and rubbed her eyes tiredly. They found us once. They'll find us again. Not if I have anything to say about it. Nessa reached across the small table and took Jevers's hands. Listen to me. I know we've only known each other for a few hours. I know this is all happening too fast. But I meant what I implied back there. I'm in this now. All the way in. We're going to get you somewhere safe, and we're going to make sure that information gets out. Those kids deserve justice, and you deserve to live. Jarvis's eyes glistened with unshed tears. Why are you doing this? Really? It can't just be because of one kiss in a debris field. Nessa considered the question seriously. When I was younger, maybe 19, I tried to do the right thing. Reported a company I was working for that was dumping toxic waste in populated areas. You know what happened? I got blacklisted, lost my job, my reputation, nearly lost my ship. I learned that trying to be a hero just gets you hurt. Then why? Because I was wrong. Nessa squeezed her hands. I was hurt because I did it alone, because I didn't have anyone backing me up. But more than that, I realized tonight that spending the last decade keeping my head down and minding my own business hasn't made me happy. It's just made me ... empty. You asked why I'm doing this. I'm doing it because for the first time in years, I feel like I'm actually living instead of just surviving. Jarvis smiled through her tears. That's the most romantic declaration I've ever heard that didn't actually include the word romantic. Give me a break. I'm new at this. But Nessa was smiling too. Come here. Jarvis stood and moved around the table, settling into Nessa's lap. They fit together perfectly. Jarvis's head tucked under Nessa's chin, their arms wrapped around each other. We're going to make it, Nessa said. More promise than prediction. I don't know how yet, but we will. I believe you, Jarvis murmured. Though statistically, our chances are don't. Don't tell me the statistics. Nessa pressed a kiss to the top of Jarvis's head. Let me have my optimistic moment. They stayed like that for a long time, holding each other in the quiet hum of the ship. Two fugitives finding comfort in the eye of the storm they both knew was coming. Outside the viewport, the stars burned cold and distant, indifferent to the struggles of those who traveled between them. But inside the wandering star, in that small circle of warmth, Nessa Thorne and Jarvis Solara had found something worth fighting for, each other.